Let's get one thing straight right out of the gate. We've all heard the advice, just do what you love and the money will follow. It sounds great on a Hallmark card, doesn't it? But if you're looking to build real wealth, the kind of wealth we talk about here at Solomon's Treasury, you need to look at passion through a different lens. You don't need to be head over heels in love with the physical object you're selling. You don't need to have a collection of it in your basement or sleep with it under your pillow. If you're crazy about sports, that doesn't mean you're destined to sell sports memorabilia. In fact, sometimes turning your hobby into your hustle is the quickest way to hate your hobby. What you actually need is a deep interest and a belief in the value of what you're doing. You need to like the process and the impact, but you don't need to be obsessed with the thing. If you're selling something just because you love it, but the margins are thin and the market is small, you're not a businessman, you're a hobbyist with a very expensive habit. We're here to build a treasury, not a collection. I want to tell you about a guy I know named Elias. Elias is a sharp guy, hard-working and dedicated. For a long time, he was in the life insurance game. Now, there's nothing wrong with life insurance, but for Elias, it was a slow death. He absolutely hated it. Every day was a grind. He wasn't passionate about the product, but more importantly, he wasn't passionate about the process. To get a single sale, he had to jump through a million hoops. We're talking about paperwork that could fill a library, medical exams, endless follow-ups, and months of waiting just to see if a deal would actually close. It drained his soul. He eventually realized that he was spending 90% of his energy on 10% of the results. So, he made a pivot. He came to work in the video production and sales space. The difference was night and day. He didn't necessarily love video files more than insurance policies, but he loved the speed, the creativity, and the fact that he could actually see the wins happening in real time. He found a product that matched his energy. When your product feels like a heavy weight around your neck, you'll never have the stamina to reach the finish line. So how do you choose? If it's not just about passion, what is it about? It's about finding that sweet spot where your interest meets high profit margins. You want to sell something that makes you feel like your time is being respected. When you find a product that solves a big problem for people and pays you well for that solution, your passion for the business grows automatically. It's a lot easier to be passionate about your work when you see your bank account growing and your stress levels dropping. Don't go looking for the thing you do for free. Go looking for the thing that you're good at, that the world needs, and that pays you enough to live the life you want. That's the true ancient wisdom of the Treasury. Focus on the value you create, not just the emotions you feel. If you can respect what you sell and see the logic in the profit, you've already won half the battle. If you're enjoying this dive into the mindset of the wealthy, make sure to follow the channel so you don't miss the rest of this blueprint. Let's talk about a mistake I see people making every single day. I call it the florist fallacy. A while back, I wanted to do something nice for my wife for the Sabbath, so I called up a local florist to order a bouquet. Now, the woman on the other end of the line was perfectly nice. She was helpful, she was patient, but she was also killing her business without even knowing it. We spent 30 minutes on the phone. 30 minutes. We talked about the types of flowers, the colors, the arrangement style, the delivery time, you name it. At the end of this half-hour marathon, she gives me the total $56. Think about that for a second. After she pays for the actual flowers, the ribbon, and the delivery guy, she's lucky if she's left with $20 in profit. She spent 30 minutes of her life, her literal life force, to make $20. When you factor in her rent, her electricity, and her taxes, she basically worked for free. She was busy, but she wasn't actually making money. The biggest problem with low-margin products isn't just the lack of money, it's the drain on your energy. That florist used the same amount of mental energy to sell me those flowers as someone else uses to sell a luxury car or a high-end consulting package. Your brain doesn't have a low-power mode for small sales. You still have to be on. You still have to be polite, and you still have to manage the details. If you're putting in 100% of your energy for a 5% reward, you're going to burn out before you ever get rich. Ancient wisdom tells us that a king doesn't spend his time counting grains of sand. He manages the harvest of the whole field. If you find yourself working so hard, but your bank account is barely moving, it's not because you're lazy. It's because you're selling the wrong thing. You're trading a diamond's worth of time for a handful of copper coins. In my father's company, I saw this play out in real time. When I took over as sales manager, the guys were making deals that brought in maybe $1,000 or $1,200 in profit. On paper, it looked okay. But we were running a big operation with a lot of employees and huge expenses. That small profit wasn't enough to sustain the dream. So I made a rule that shook everyone up. I told them they weren't allowed to close a deal unless the profit margin was at least $5,000. People lost their minds. They complained, they huffed, they puffed, and they said it was impossible. But here's the kicker. Once they were forced to look for $5,000 deals, they found them. And they realized something mind-blowing. It took the exact same amount of time to close a $5,000 deal as it did to close a $500 deal. The paperwork is the same. The phone call is the same. The only difference is the size of the check. I'm curious to hear from you guys in the comments. Have you ever realized you were spending way too much time on a small project that barely paid the bills? What was that aha moment like for you? It's an adrenaline game. If you've ever worked in sales, or even just closed a small deal on an old bike on Craigslist, you know exactly what I'm talking about. There is a specific kind of high that comes with a win. When a salesperson is having a great week, you can see it in their walk. They're on top of the world. They're confident, they're funny, and they seem to have this magnetic energy that just pulls more success toward them. But when they're having a bad week, you can see that too. They look like they're carrying the weight of the world on their shoulders. In the world of Solomon's Treasury, we understand that money isn't just paper, it's energy. Sales is an adrenaline sport. To stay at the top of your game, you have to chase that feeling, that fire. But here's the secret. You can't keep that fire burning if you're waiting months and months between sparks. You need to be winning often enough to stay hot. High margins aren't everything now. Let's look at the flip side of the high margin rule. Before I started my business, Wealthy Commercials, I had this idea that I wanted to sell private jets. I mean, think about it. The profit margins are astronomical. I'm passionate about aviation, and it feels like the ultimate high-value move. But then I started talking to people who actually sold jets for a living, and they told me something that changed my perspective forever. They said a great year for a private jet salesperson might involve selling only 1 or 2 planes, just 1 or 2 wins in 365 days. Think about how hard it is to build momentum when you're stuck in a sales process that takes forever. If you're not winning every week, or at least every month, you start to get rusty. You lose that adrenaline high we just talked about. You become a ghost town salesperson, waiting and waiting for a single drop of rain in a desert of silence. High margins are vital, but if the frequency is too low, the engine of your success will eventually stall out. The rhythm of success. The goal is to find a product or service that sits in the Goldilocks zone. It needs to have a high profit margin, but it also needs to be something you can sell frequently. You want to be able to go from win to win. If you aren't making a sale every day, you should at least be closing something every single week. Why? Because people can feel when you're winning. Clients can sense when you're hot. When you've just closed 3 deals in a row, you walk into that 4th meeting with a level of confidence that you just can't fake. You aren't desperate. You aren't begging for the contract. You're simply inviting them to join the winning team. That's the ancient wisdom in action, positioning yourself so that your success feeds into itself, creating a snowball effect that eventually becomes unstoppable. You want a business that keeps you on fire, not one that leaves you waiting for a miracle once a year. I want to ask you guys, do you think it's harder to stay motivated when you aren't selling for a long time? Or is it harder to stay humble when you're on a massive winning streak? Tell me your thoughts in the comments. We live in an era where everyone wants the easy way out. Everyone is trying to build an empire from their couch. They want to sell through Zoom. They want to close deals via email, or they hope a DM will land them a whale. But here's some ancient wisdom for the modern world. Nothing, and I mean nothing, beats looking another human being in the eye. When you get in front of a client physically in the same room, your odds of winning skyrocket. Why? Because you aren't just a voice on a speaker or a face in a little digital box. You are a presence. You are bringing your energy into their space. While everyone else is hiding behind a screen because they're afraid of rejection or too lazy to travel, the person who shows up is the person who gets the prize. If you want to stand out, stop being a digital ghost and start being a physical force. I remember a specific sales trip that perfectly illustrates this. We hit the road, going from state to state, meeting potential clients back to back. It was a marathon. But because we were winning at almost every stop, something started to happen. We weren't just selling anymore, we were on a hot streak. By the time I got to my last meeting of the trip, I wasn't tired. I was on fire. I had already closed so much business in such a short period that my confidence was through the roof. This is why momentum matters. If that had been my only meeting of the month, I might have been nervous, I might have been overthinking. But because I was coming off a string of victories, I walked into that room like I owned it. Your past wins are the fuel for your current performance. When you're hot, the world knows it before you even open your mouth. In that last meeting, the clients did what all clients do. They tried to hammer me. They wanted a lower price. They wanted a faster timeline. They wanted me to add more to the package for less money. They were trying to see where my breaking point was. But here's the thing, I didn't move an inch. I didn't give a single discount. I didn't trim the package. Why? Because quite frankly, I didn't need the contract. I had already won so much that week that this deal was just a bonus. When you don't need the money, you become the most powerful person in the room. They saw my confidence. They saw that I wasn't desperate, and they saw that I was on fire. And you know what happened? They gave me everything I asked for. Not a dollar off the price, not an ounce off the package. They took the whole thing because people don't buy products. They buy into strength and certainty. I've got to ask, have you ever been in a situation where you felt so confident that you were willing to walk away from a deal? How did the other person react when they realized you didn't need them? Let me know in the comments below. There's an old saying that I live by, and if you want to protect your treasury, you should too. Is the juice worth the squeeze? Think about that for a second. To get juice out of a lemon, you have to apply pressure. You have to use your energy. Now, if you spend an hour squeezing 100 tiny dried out lemons just to get half a glass of juice, you've wasted your time. You're exhausted, your hands hurt, and you're still thirsty. This is exactly what it's like when you chase low-ticket sales or high-maintenance clients who don't pay well. You're working hard, but the reward doesn't justify the effort. In the world of high-value products, we only look for the biggest, juiciest opportunities. We want the kind of squeeze that fills the whole pitcher with one go. Your time is the only thing you can't get more of, so stop spending it on cheap wins that leave you feeling empty. Let's go back to Elias for a moment. Why did he hate selling life insurance? It wasn't just the money, it was the hassle factor. The paperwork, the medical exams, the constant back and forth with underwriters. All of that is the squeeze. When the squeeze involves mountains of bureaucracy and endless complaining from clients who are only paying you a small commission, your mental health takes a hit. You start to resent your business. You start to wake up hitting the snooze button because you don't want to deal with the noise. High-value products usually come with high-value clients. These are people who respect your time because they value their own. They don't haggle over pennies, and they don't call you at 3 a.m. to ask about a minor detail. When you raise your margins, you don't just get more money, you get a better quality of life. You get to breathe. You need to set a rule for your life, just like I did for my sales team. You need a minimum profit margin for your time. If a project or a product doesn't hit a certain number, you simply don't do it. It sounds cold, but it's actually the kindest thing you can do for yourself and your future. When you say no to the $500 deal that's going to take 10 hours of work, you are saying yes to the $5,000 deal that hasn't shown up yet. You are keeping your schedule open and your energy high for the big fish. If your net is full of minnows, there's no room for the tuna. Ancient wisdom is about discernment. It's about knowing what to ignore so you can focus on what actually matters. Decide today what your squeeze is worth, and don't you dare settle for less. I want to know your opinion on this. Do you think it's better to have 10 small clients who are easy to deal with, or one big client who pays 10 times as much but is a bit more demanding? Which one would you choose? Let me know in the comments. We've covered a lot of ground today, and if you've stayed with me this far, it's because you know deep down that there's a better way to play the game of life. The blueprint is actually pretty simple once you strip away the noise. You find something that interests you, you make sure the profit margins are high enough to respect your time, and you sell it frequently enough to keep your spirit on fire. That's it. That's the ancient wisdom in a nutshell. It's not about working yourself into an early grave, it's about working smart enough that every hour you spend pays you back tenfold. When you focus on high-value products, you aren't just making money. You're buying back your freedom. You're building a treasury that allows you to live on your own terms without having to beg for scraps or stress over a $50 flour bill. So, if this is so simple, why isn't everyone doing it? Why is the world full of people struggling with low-margin hustles? It's because of the comfort trap. It feels safe to sell something cheap because you think more people will buy it. It feels safe to hide behind an email because you're afraid of the no you might get in person. But safe is the fastest way to stay average. The people who make it big, the ones we talk about here at Solomon's Treasury, are the ones who are willing to be uncomfortable. They're willing to set a $5,000 minimum. They're willing to travel to meet a client. They're willing to stand their ground on price even when they're nervous. Most people fail because they choose the easy path today, which leads to a hard life tomorrow. We choose the disciplined path today so we can have an easy, wealthy life tomorrow. Now, it's time for action. You've heard the stories of Elias, the florist, and the private jet salespeople. You've seen how momentum and margins can change your entire reality. Your job now is to audit your own life. Look at what you're selling, whether it's a product, a service, or just your time at a job. Ask yourself, is the juice worth the squeeze? Am I on fire, or am I just lukewarm? If you aren't happy with the answer, it's time to pivot. Start looking for those high-margin opportunities. Start building that momentum. The doors to the treasury are open, but you're the only one who can walk through them. Remember, the world reacts to your confidence and your results. Go out there, find your high-value path, and stay on fire. And that's a wrap on today's masterclass. If this video gave you a new perspective on how to value your time and your business, do me a huge favor. Hit that like button right now. It really helps the channel reach more people who need this wisdom. Also, don't forget to comment below with your biggest takeaway from today and share this video with someone who's working too hard for too little. Finally, if you haven't already, subscribe and turn on those notifications so you never miss a trip to the Treasury. I'll see you in the next one.